New York, a city that never truly sleeps. The streets are always full of lights, noise, and people moving from one place to another. But even in a city this alive, there are places where silence feels unnatural. Places where the air feels colder, heavier, as if something unseen is watching from the darkness. There are certain old alleys in New York that locals try to avoid after midnight. The streetlights flicker, the wind whistles between the tall buildings, and sometimes people claim they see something standing in the shadows, something wearing a white wedding dress. Many people think it is just an urban legend, a scary story told to frighten late-night walkers. But one man named Clark learned the truth the hard way, and the night he saw her changed his life forever. It was around 12:40 in the morning when Clark left his office after a long late-night shift. The cold New York air hit his face as he stepped out of the subway station. A light fog had spread across the streets, making the bright city lights look dull and ghostly. Clark was tired and just wanted to reach home as quickly as possible. Normally, he would walk along the main road, but that night he decided to take a short alley that connected directly to the street where his apartment building stood. The alley was old and narrow. The walls were covered in faded graffiti and broken posters. Rainwater from earlier in the evening had collected into small puddles across the cracked pavement. Clark walked slowly, his footsteps echoing softly in the empty alley. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. As he walked deeper inside, he suddenly stopped. At the far end of the alley, someone was standing there. At first, Clark thought it might be a woman waiting for someone. But as he looked closer, he realized something strange. The woman was wearing a long white wedding dress. Her long black hair covered most of her face, and her head was hanging down as if she was staring at the ground. For a moment, Clark simply stood there, confused. What would a bride be doing alone in a dark alley at midnight? Trying to be polite, Clark called out carefully, "Hey, excuse me, are you okay?" His voice echoed slightly through the alley walls, but the woman didn't move. She didn't answer. She just stood there completely still. Clark felt a strange chill run down his spine. He slowly took a few more steps forward, and that's when he noticed something that made his heart start beating faster. Her feet were not touching the ground. She was floating just a few inches above the pavement. Clark blinked in disbelief, thinking maybe his tired eyes were playing tricks on him. But then, very slowly, the bride lifted her head. The dim yellow streetlight above flickered, and its weak light fell directly on her face. Clark's body froze. Half of the bride's face looked burned and pale, as if it had been destroyed long ago. The skin looked cracked and lifeless. Her eyes were completely black and empty. Not dark brown, not shadowed, just black. And on her lips there was a slow, unnatural smile. Then in a low whisper, a voice came from her mouth. Clark. The moment Clark heard his name, every drop of blood in his body felt cold. He had never seen this woman before. He had never spoken to her. So, how did she know his name? Before Clark could even react, something even more horrifying happened. The bride's neck slowly twisted, further and further, until her head turned almost completely around. Then she began to laugh. But it wasn't a normal laugh. It sounded broken, hollow, and painfully wrong, like several voices whispering at the same time. Fear exploded inside Clark's chest. Without thinking, he turned around and started running as fast as he could. His shoes splashed loudly through the rainwater puddles as he ran toward the exit of the alley. But after only a few seconds, he felt something terrible. It felt like someone was chasing him. Something fast, something close. Clark forced himself to look back, and what he saw nearly made him collapse in terror. The bride was no longer standing on the ground. She was moving along the wall of the alley, crawling across the bricks like a twisted shadow. Her long hair floated wildly in the cold air. Her dark eyes were locked directly on Clark. Then suddenly, she launched herself forward, moving toward him at a terrifying speed. Clark screamed in panic and pushed himself to run even faster. The alley seemed longer than before, like it would never end. But finally, he saw the bright lights of the main road ahead. With the last of his strength, Clark burst out of the alley and onto the busy street filled with cars and late-night traffic. And the moment he stepped into the bright streetlights, the bride disappeared. Just like that. Gone. Clark stood there shaking, breathing heavily, trying to understand what had just happened. The next day, still terrified, Clark searched online about that alley. What he discovered made his hands tremble. More than 20 years ago, a young bride had been found dead in that exact alley. On the night of her wedding, she had been brutally murdered by someone who was never caught. And since that night, people say her spirit still wanders that alley, searching in the darkness. But the most terrifying part of the legend is this. People say if the ghost bride sees you, she somehow learns your name, and once she knows your name, she never stops following you. Clark wishes the story ended there, but sometimes, late at night, when his apartment is completely silent, he hears something outside his window, a faint scratching sound. And when he slowly looks outside, he sometimes sees a white wedding dress standing in the darkness, watching him, waiting.